And my kids are literally starving. I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm like a mean barbarian, but I told the kids, I said, I'm not even going to let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
This morning, a Utah mom influencer arrested, facing 6 felony counts of aggravated child abuse.
Now, does have duct tape around each ankle. He's not telling the RP why, and said that there's sores around his wrists and ankles. He's becoming emotional regarding the child's health. I'm going to go ahead and have medical state on this one.
What took so long? I mean, that's really what screams out here. How could this possibly take so long? Neighbors complained for years. Her eldest daughter disassociated herself from the family. The husband left the house. Her own videos that she posted were disturbing in and of themselves.
You're going to want to buckle up for this one. Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button. And if you're returning, welcome back. I truly do appreciate your support on my channel, and I hope that you are subscribed as well. Before we get started, I do want to give a trigger warning that this story very much does involve both a psychological and physical abuse of children. And I also want to provide the disclaimer that all of the information I've gathered is publicly available, and a lot of what I will be contributing to the story is my opinion. A famous family vlogger was arrested on August 31st when the second youngest of her children climbed out of a window and escaped the neighbor's house to ask for food, for water, and for help. It was immediately noticeable to the neighbors that were helping this child that he was extremely emaciated and that he had duct tape around his legs and deep lacerations from being tied with a rope. He told the neighbor that he was scared and that his 10-year-old sister was still in the home and that she was bound with duct tape on her ankles and wrists as well. The emotional neighbor called the police, and this horrendous excuse for a human being who really has no right to even call herself a mother was put in handcuffs and escorted to a place where hopefully she will experience at least some of the horror she inflicted on her own children and never know life outside of a prison cell ever again. According to an article in the New York Post, it says 8 Passengers host Ruby Franke is listed as in custody on the Washington County Sheriff's Office website after being taken into custody on August 30th. Her business partner and ConneXions co-founder, Jodi Hildebrandt, was also arrested that day under the same suspicions. In Utah, the definition of aggravated child abuse includes starvation, broken bones, head injuries from hitting or shaking, and suffocation. If intentionally inflicted, the perpetrator faces up to 15 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. I personally cannot imagine a case that can be made where a child is found to be severely malnourished with duct tape around their legs and wounds to their body and have it be anything but intentional. But it will be interesting to hear the case that the defense team makes on Ruby Franke's behalf as they try to explain how this could have accidentally happened. Since this story broke, a microscope and a bright light has been shone on the home that this child escaped from, and it turns out that there's a lot more to unpack regarding the life of this well-known family vlogger than anyone could have imagined. Ruby Franke's children were the primary subjects of her YouTube channel 8 Passengers for several years. And while most people who document their lives online do try to control the picture they want the world to see and generally paint it to be far more rosy than it actually is, it is no surprise that life behind the scenes is not even close to what they've led the public to believe it is. As it turns out, the things you see online are generally not reflective of reality. Who knew? The extent of the abuse and maltreatment that Ruby Franke put these kids through, physically, psychologically, mentally, and even spiritually, is beyond comprehension to anyone with even a speck of a soul. Let's get into this story. Ruby was born on January 18, 1982 to parents Chad and Jennifer Griffith, and she grew up with siblings Bo, Bonnie, Ellie, and Julie. She married her husband Kevin on December 28th in the year 2000, and together they had 6 children: Sherry, Chad, Abby, Julie, Russell, and Eve. Both the family that Ruby grew up in and the family she was raising were all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as Mormon. In 2015, Ruby launched a family vlogging channel on YouTube called 8 Passengers. And from what I could find, it sounded like the channel was initially started to document the cute antics of her youngest daughter, Eve, and the crazy things that she would get into. At the time that the channel was started, the age range of the children ranged from infancy of the youngest child to the oldest daughter, who was around 11 or 12 at the time. Over the course of its 7-year existence on YouTube, the channel amassed over 2.3 million subscribers, over 1 billion lifetime views of all of their videos combined, and the family earned millions of dollars from its success. As with all of these family vlogging channels, the parents carry a recording device of some kind with them at all times. They record their grocery trips, their kids' sick days, preparing and cooking meals, watching their kids' sporting events, inviting the world to their kids' birthday parties, and bringing everyone along with them to all of their friend visits and family get-togethers. Most of this content I find absolutely mind-numbing, and I cannot come up with any reasonable explanation as to why anyone would be entertained by it, let alone millions of people, but for some reason, it's popular and it's easy to access. And as much as I want to avoid supporting these family vlogging channels in any way, I do feel it important to at least provide an example of what I'm talking about. 2 of Ruby's sisters, Bonnie and Ellie, are both family vloggers as well and have millions of subscribers on their channels. And this is just a recent clip from Bonnie's channel where she is inviting the entire world to celebrate her son's birthday.
Strawberries. Everyone gets a blackberry because there was like nothing left in the fridge. Sprinkled with hemp seeds, and then it looks like balsamic, but it's not. It's date syrup. I will link the one that we're using because there's 0 sugar in it. It's literally just dates and fresh squeezed orange juice. I did not do the fresh squeezing, but it is still fresh squeezed.
Take a picture.
First things first. Do we have sunblock?
Yes.
Yes. Do we have towels?
Yes.
Maybe. Basically, that's all we need, right?
Yeah.
Wait, what else do we want to...
And that is 60 seconds of all of our lives that we will never get back. There is nothing entertaining about these videos whatsoever, and I would encourage people, now that it is coming to light just how harmful it is to exploit children in this way, as we've seen through the exposure of the behavior and arrest of Ruby Franke, to stop supporting these channels, unsubscribe from them, and let them fade into the abyss. Children cannot consent to having their lives put on the internet where it will be forever, and they cannot consent to the long-term repercussions of growing up with absolutely no privacy and no boundaries between themselves and millions of total strangers. And even clicking on this stuff puts money in the pockets of their parents, who will continue to do it as long as the revenue is coming in. And that's not to say that every family vlogger is starving and tying up their children, and it is irresponsible to paint an entire group of people with a common thread as being horrendous based on the worst behavior of a few. But there is nothing harmless about putting your children's identities up everywhere. It cannot be reversed, and we need to just cut these family vlogging channels off cold turkey. And I mean this when I say that there is absolutely nothing off limits for these family vlogging parents. And I do mean nothing. These parents will document the most benign and boring life experiences, and they will also post things like their kids' temper tantrums and emotional breakdowns, which means they're using the times when their kids feel the most vulnerable and unsafe and unsteady as entertainment for others, and in turn, income for the family. Then there are the uncomfortable moments that come from growing up that most of us would be absolutely horrified if these things were set on display for the world to see, yet that concept was entirely lost on Ruby and probably many other parents like her, as she would regularly bring the camera into the bathroom with her to record things like her 12-year-old daughter learning to shave her legs or relentlessly questioning about the acne that she had on her face.
And Julie has been asking all summer if she can shave her legs and armpits, and I
never said that. I don't want to.
You don't?
No. Julie, you should shave your armpits.
I think your armpits need to be shaved more than your legs do.
When you start
Let me
speaking, when you start getting...
And despite her daughter expressing her clear embarrassment for having this very personal and vulnerable moment shared with the world, Ruby just laughs and continues to document the whole thing and put it out there for the viewing pleasure of millions of strangers of all ages.
Can you not film it?
So I just want...
It would seem that a parent who does this to their kids does not actually see them as human beings, but rather employees for all intents and purposes. They're there to fulfill a job, and in this case, they don't have the right to quit. And these kids have no experiences that are not tied to making money. And as a result, I would think that it would be really, really, really difficult to develop a strong foundation in reality, or feel like any of the connections that you make with other people, including your own mother, are actually genuine. They would be asking, are you actually interested in me, or are you just looking for something to record? Are you really wanting to go shopping with me and spend quality time with me, or are you just trying to create the next viral moment? Does dad really want to teach me to throw a baseball, or is he just trying to manufacture a relatable situation to draw in more viewers? Unfortunately, the long-term effects of forcing kids to grow up in this way on camera with no boundaries and no privacy and no respect for their personal space probably won't be known to the full extent for a long time. But aside from the constant and relentless chronicling of everything that these kids went through on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis, what became the concern of their large mass of viewers was Ruby's extreme parenting methods, which many of their audience felt were abusive and cruel. And upon looking into this case, there were far too many examples of the horrendous treatment that Ruby directed at her children. Before I get into those, I just want to be clear. We all agree that children need discipline, and they need boundaries, and they need age-appropriate responsibilities. They need to learn to listen, to take responsibility for their decisions, to fix their mistakes, and to work hard. They also need an exorbitant amount of love, compassion, empathy, and grace. And I think many of us would also agree that parenting is the hardest job in the world, especially if your goal is to raise good, kind, hardworking human beings who grow up to contribute to society in a positive and productive way. And methods of teaching those lessons vary from family to family, but healthy, grounded parents understand the difference between discipline and abuse and being stern versus just being a bully. Ruby Franke, however, seemed to believe that bullying was an effective teaching method. Control was compassionate, relentless browbeating over mistakes was how to instill empathy, and withholding basic life necessities like food and a bed is the same thing as learning personal responsibility. And after witnessing Ruby's definition of good parenting, what would come as a shock is if any of these children emerged from under her iron fist without long-term psychological damage or mental health struggles or attachment disorders or debilitating stress and anxiety or trust issues or eating disorders or a combination of any of these problems or all of the above simultaneously for the rest of their lives. One situation that seems to have drawn a lot of attention is when Ruby's oldest son decided to play a prank on his little brother. He woke him up at 2 o'clock in the morning and told him that the family was going to go to Disneyland. Of course, the older boy crushed the dreams of his younger sibling fairly quickly, and his mother was not amused by the joke at all. As a punishment, Ruby took the privilege of having a bedroom away from her older son, and he was forced to sleep on a beanbag in the downstairs living room for several months.
For 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October, and they gave my room back like 2 weeks ago. Oh, I'll give you the reason why I lost my bedroom. I think so. I think this is the reason. At least this is the reason that's been in my head. It's pretty funny, but now that I look back, I mean, it's pretty depressing.
No, we never told our viewers.
That I woke Russell up at 2 in the morning and told him that we're going to Disneyland and he has to pack. And he got up and made his bed all neatly and then packed all his clothes in a suitcase. And then he walked out the door and I'm like, Russell, he was like, what? And he's all happy. Has his sunglasses on. And I was like, we're not going to Disneyland. And he started crying and hitting me. And then he went back to bed in tears.
At the end of that conversation, Ruby was not impressed by the fact that all of the kids still found it funny, and she threatened to return her son to the beanbag for further punishment. Though I find it interesting that the only part Ruby did find funny was the fact that her oldest son was sleeping on a beanbag for that length of time.
Sleeping on a beanbag since October.
And I just have to say, I do feel like that was kind of a mean thing to do. And anybody who knows me knows that I absolutely hate pranks. Like, there are no words to describe the level of loathing that I feel when it comes to pranks. I know that they're generally harmless and people are usually just trying to have fun, but ultimately I hate the idea of someone intentionally making somebody else feel bad or making them feel embarrassed or stupid. And the fact that this little boy got his hopes way up while his brother knew that it was just a joke, it really does make my heart hurt. That being said, kids play pranks on each other all the time. It's what they do. And I understand if you feel like some of these pranks might get out of hand or they might warrant a consequence of some kind, but making your teenage son sleep on a beanbag for 7 months, that is legitimately insane. If it were me, I would have told my son, that was really mean. Go apologize to your brother. Perhaps he would have lost his phone for a couple of days. Give him a little bit of time to think about maybe not being a jerk in the future. But to take away his bedroom and make him sleep in this crunched up position where he's likely not going to get the rest that his body needs, which would have harmful effects on his brain for not getting adequate rest and have harmful effects on his body for sleeping in a rounded position night after night. That is completely unhinged. It also seems like things like illnesses and bedwetting, which are normal things that come with raising young children, were still no reason for Ruby to soften her authoritarian approach to raising kids. Instead of doing what most normal moms do for their kids in those situations when they have an accident or they're dealing with a stomach bug, which is to comfort them, to keep them close and or change their bedding, which yes, oftentimes means disrupting your own sleep in order to take care of them, Ruby thought it was compassionate to let them take their own pillows and blankets and sleep on the bathroom floor.
In bed with me at about 2 this morning. She's like, Mom, I peed the bed, which is not like her. She pees the bed maybe like once every 8 months. Like, it's been a very long time since she wet the bed. I was like, oh, darn it, that's all right. Just go sleep on the floor in the bathroom. We're gonna put a pillow and a blanket by the toilet, and you can camp out in the bathroom, okay?
And when it came to all of the kids, but particularly the older ones, Ruby seemed to revel in making sure that they knew that she was the one in control and that she had no reservations at all about taking away even the things that were most important to them if they did not live up to what she felt were demonstrations of responsible behavior, character, and repentance. In a video of Ruby and Kevin, they were sitting down describing the behavior that they felt was unacceptable from their oldest son, and that he seemed to demonstrate his best behavior when it came to his playing on the football team. So they thought that the best thing to do was to actually take football away from him, and that he was going to use football as the ticket out of his home as he planned to become the best athlete he could be and leave as soon as he graduated. But after forbidding him from playing football, they took it to the next level.
What I did was I went around the house and I have
throwing them away.
Yes.
That's my homework.
Whoa, whoa. Oh, whoa.
Homework. I need that to turn that in tomorrow. No, I'm serious. That's like half my grade right now.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I will throw this at the wall. I need that homework, Mom.
Okay, so if you have something in the bag that you would like out, you can pay cash for it. So you learn the value of your items.
And whatever isn't claimed by the end of the day goes in the garbage.
So as we know from the recent arrest, both the child that escaped and the second one found in the home were discovered to be emaciated and malnourished. So it comes as no surprise that this would be among the numerous outward signs of how these children were really treated, as Ruby was never shy about the fact that she was willing to allow her children to starve. In a video from just a couple of years ago, Ruby is sitting in her car talking about how she just got a text from her 6-year-old daughter's teacher, letting Ruby know that her daughter had apparently forgotten her lunch at home and asked if she could bring her something to eat. And this is how this Mom of the Year responded.
A text message from Eve's teacher, and she said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
I think her teacher was probably uncomfortable because anybody with a soul is not going to want to sit and allow a child to starve no matter how they got into that situation. In that same vein, her older son had forgotten to bring lunch money with him to get food at school, and this was Ruby's response to him.
I'll tell you this, honey, but unless you find a friend who's willing to share some of their food with you, I don't think you're going to be able to eat. But if you're not responsible for your lunch and your lunch money, that's the natural consequence. And I'm really sorry you're learning this the hard way. Just hang in there today and just make up your mind. You're going to be really careful and make sure you grab your stuff when you go to school next time. And maybe you have a good friend who will share some of their sandwich with you or something.
Yes, it is really irritating when your kids forget something at home that they need for school, because you've got to take time out of your day and the million other things that you have to do and drop it and drive that thing over to them at school. My kids have forgotten all sorts of things at home over the years, and we do our best to make sure that everybody grabs what they need in the morning as we're leaving and as we're running out the door. But we all make mistakes. We forget. Even as adults, we forget things all the time. But as an adult, you have the power and the resources to correct those things in the moment. Like if Ruby was out all day or she was going to work and she forgot to grab lunch, would she starve herself and wait until dinner time? Or would she probably stop and buy herself something? The thing is, she has those options. Her children do not. And I understand that there are situations where we just can't get those things to our kids. We might be at work. We might be someplace where we're not anywhere close to the school, and they've got to figure out how to do without it. I have told my kids many times, I will do what I can, but there might be a time when you forget something and I can't bring it to you, and you're just going to have to figure it out. But Ruby seems to particularly enjoy those opportunities that her children give her to be cruel during those times when they make a mistake and when she could choose to show grace and understanding for the fact that we are flawed and forgetful at times, but she prefers to demonstrate the power she has by choosing to let them suffer for simply not being perfect all the time. And on the subject of food, Ruby's favorite way to force her kids to obey was to constantly threaten them that they would go without eating if they didn't listen.
And my kids are literally starving. I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm like a mean barbarian.
Stop crying or I'm going to have you go upstairs and you won't have any breakfast.
Can you give me some breakfast?
You don't need food.
Thank you.
Jump in. Massage my back. Get rubbing. Okay, massage my back. Get scratching. Scratch my head. Come on, you gotta earn your keep. You don't get breakfast if you don't massage my back.
You're so mean.
Okay. Get up there and scratch. Well, I guess you don't get food today.
Okay, Russell. I'm only going to say it one more time, and then you're going to lose the privilege to eat dinner.
And this is where she thought that hitting and pinching her youngest daughter was the best way to help her understand respect for other people's space and well-being.
Can I push you?
No.
I kick you?
No.
What if you're in my way and I want to kick you? What happens?
Well, did you know somebody was in my way in line and then they kicked me and stomped?
Well, did you know that Russell was in your way today and you hurt him so badly he had to come home?
Eve, everybody has a space around them that is their boundary, and you can't go past it because you can hurt them.
What if I took my hand and I hit you like that? Would that be crossing the boundary? Yeah.
Is that okay to do?
Is that okay? But what if I really am in a hurry and I just don't like you being there? I have a really, really good reason for just getting in your boundary.
You can't do that. Well, if you do that, that's mean.
Ruby also made sure that her kids knew that nothing in their home was actually theirs, reinforcing the understanding that mom has the right to take away anything at any time for any reason, and you're not allowed to disagree because none of it is actually yours, and whatever you are allowed to use or just have access to, as mom likes to say, it's because your mom loves you enough just to let you, at least for that moment, but don't get used to it.
Here's the deal. Everything that comes into this house belongs to who?
No.
Belongs to me. Everything. So you don't have a cell phone, you have access to a phone.
I don't.
Chad does not have a cell phone I took from him. He has access, which benefits were withdrawn. See how that works?
Looking forward to the most in the new house. for sure my new room, not my room, Mom's room that she's letting me have or use.
The kitchen will be removed. It will not be replaced. I refuse to have a kitchen in my basement. My kids are not welcome to come live with me after they're 18. I am very straightforward about that.
Funny thing is, Kevin and Ruby Franke would have nothing in that house or the house itself if it weren't for the hundreds of hours of videos of their children that they put on YouTube for monetary gain. So in reality, everything in the house, including the house, belongs to the kids. And Ruby should be asking them for permission to use these things or to live in the house at all once they are adults and old enough to legally own and care for it themselves. Bet you didn't think about that. And it should come as no surprise that despite everything that this mother expects from her children, Ruby felt no need to make any sacrifices as a parent for her children whatsoever.
Abby keeps asking me to read the books that she's reading in school, and I keep telling her, no, I do not have to read those books. I am not in school, and I am doing my own research and my own writing. So what do I do with this?
And to top it all off, Ruby Franke regularly engaged in faith manipulation to essentially scare her children into thinking that if they faced any negative consequences in life for their behavior, it was because they hadn't repented enough. And the way to avoid danger and disaster is to pray every day, because if you pray all the time, nothing bad will ever happen. One year, she told her two youngest children because of their behavior, they would not be getting a visit from Santa. And while they had to watch their older siblings open presents on Christmas morning, this is what she felt was appropriate for the two who actually still believed in the magic of St. Nick.
Two youngest are showing long patterns of selfishness. They have been showing, through their choices, their unwillingness to repent, their unwillingness to feel sorrow over some pretty egregious choices that they've made. So Kevin and I have decided that we are going to give the gift of truth to them this year for Christmas. We are going to give them the gift of boundaries, and we're going to give them the gift of repentance. We just laid it out very clear, and we told them that this year they are not going to be visited by Santa.
There was also a situation where the Franke family, minus the father, were traveling down the freeway in Utah, and they just happened to be in the vicinity of a crash that happened near them. Ruby grabbed this opportunity for prime content, filmed the people who were actually involved in the accident, and then told her kids that the reason they had not been hit is because they say their prayers every morning.
And you know what? I want to tell you something, and I want you to really listen.
We should have been in that crash.
I could go on, and I am not exaggerating when I say that this is just a small handful of clips where the absolute insane psychological abuse and physical abuse and neglect that these kids had to deal with for years was just indisputable. I had to stop myself from looking for more crazy clips to include because I wanted to put every single one of them in here, but if I did, we would be the ones missing out on Christmas until the year 2054. So how did this all come undone? Well, around 2020, subscribers, viewers, and even neighbors to the Franke family started to become increasingly vocal about Ruby's strict parenting methods. Concerned people saw what they agreed were extreme measures and even started a petition to have the channel removed from YouTube and also to have CPS check in on the welfare of her kids. The reports regarding the deep concerns about Ruby Franke's treatment of her children were becoming more and more consistent. And after her arrest, there were neighbors that agreed it was long overdue and that they were afraid that the kids would eventually be removed in body bags had the arrest not happened. And in 2022, after a constant, non-stop barrage of messages and comments from the public demanding that she fix her behavior, the 8 Passengers channel inexplicably disappeared from YouTube altogether. But eventually, she did post a video about why the channel had been taken down, but the explanation was bizarre.
Full time. You wonder where I've been on my vlogs? You wonder why I left YouTube? It's to save my kids. No amount of money. I'm telling you, I was making millions. And I left it because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is. This is the truth, and this is where I stand. And fortunately, I had a chance. I had them in my home long enough to do it, and I'm not going to lose them. They're seeing truth, they're accepting truth, they're loving truth.
What? So they were being hurt by people's comments, most of which were likely out of concern for their well-being, which you probably didn't like because people were calling you out for being an abusive narcissist, but they weren't hurt by the fact that they have a mom who believes in cruel and unusual punishments for even the smallest of offenses and is willing to let them starve or be isolated as a means of teaching them how to be loving and compassionate human beings.
That was my motivating drive. It is my motivating drive for creating this content. I was a hugely disconnected, selfish, aggressive, neglectful mother. Entitled. I wanted my kids to be happy, which AKA translated into, I want my kids to get off my back because I want to do what I want to do. I want to be able to go to Target. I want to be able to shop. I want to be able to have a moment of silence where I can just think. It was all about me.
You're so mean.
Okay. Get up there and scratch.
And I made my kids responsible for that. And so I allowed them to have what they wanted.
After she shut down her 8 Passengers channel based on the idea that the concerned viewers were the ones that were actually harming her children, Ruby decided that her true calling in life was to become some kind of self-declared mental health expert, life coach, and family therapist for others with no legitimate certification whatsoever. And in June 2022, she co-founded an organization called ConneXions with a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt, and the main focus was, wait for it, parenting advice. On their website and YouTube channel, both Jodi and Ruby posted videos of themselves individually and other videos of them sitting together on a couch in Jodi Hildebrandt's home, answering viewer-submitted questions about how to address certain issues with their kids and spouses. Their advice to families was on how to handle disobedient children, how to handle challenges in marriage and relationships, and their favorite talking points to tell their followers that they needed to do everything they can to live in truth and to love your kids in truth.
Is not to provide them with a father. Your child is not to provide them with a magical childhood. I'm going to do a video on that coming up, magical childhoods. Your job is not to make sure that your children are accepted by their peers or that they have friends or birthday parties or Christmas presents or
beds or food.
The list of things that people think children need today are astronomical and very unrealistic. Your job is solely to love your children in the truth.
Where do they teach you to talk like this? In some Panama City sailor want a hump bar? Or is this getaway day and your last shot at his whiskey? Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
There are hundreds of videos and episodes of their podcasts listed on the website, though the YouTube channel that is connected to the website has been deleted. They also run a Facebook group called Moms of Truth, where if you are looking for a way to torture yourself, you can view all of their videos where they offer expert advice to parents, much like a Dear Abby approach, but instead of articles written into a newspaper, they just put them into a video. It's painful. And if it's possible, their beliefs on how to raise kids and navigate them through this harsh and cruel world became more extreme than what Ruby had already demonstrated on her family vlogging channel. And though Jodi is a licensed mental health professional in the state of Utah, like Ruby abused her power as a parent to manipulate, control, and neglect her children, Jodi appears to abuse her power by using the PhD that comes with her name and convince other moms to copy the egregious RubyFranke brand of parenting techniques and take it a step further, insisting that Ruby's children should not have contact with any other kids in their neighborhood or in the world, honestly. Now, if I were to provide my unprofessional analysis of why Ruby's involvement with ConneXions seemed to make things markedly worse for her children, I would say this. I believe that Ruby was already a naturally paranoid person. Yes, as a Christian, you want your kids to make friends with good people, to make the choice to surround themselves with good influences, to make choices for themselves where they walk away from negative conversations or choose not to use bad language or resist the urge to do things just because their friends are doing it. But most of us understand that it is a bumpy road along the way and they are going to make choices that you don't agree with. But ultimately, you do hope that they will come to you for advice and you can help them think about those decisions and hopefully just make better ones next time. However, Ruby truly seemed to be paranoid about these things, which is why she was so controlling over her kids. She couldn't handle the idea that they might make choices that she didn't like. And I believe she thought it would be the end of their souls and their salvation if they even set one toenail out of line, and there would be no way to bring them back in. So she felt it was better to rein them in as tightly as possible, isolating them from their friends, isolating them from the world through withholding technology, and automatically resorting to the most extreme threats if they demonstrated any sort of deviancy from what she felt was the truth, which was to threaten to make them starve and literally removing something that they depend on to live. And I think ConneXions fed that paranoia, and the beliefs of both she and Jodi made it seem like taking it from controlling through mental manipulation to controlling through physical restraint was justified and for the good of the kids. All that being said, with all of this relentless effort to essentially bind these kids to the right path, both physically and psychologically, in stark contrast to those methods, both Jodi and Ruby made it clear that if their kids ever fail in any way, then parents need to get used to the idea of living without their children in their lives at all.
So Jodi and I have each shared an example from our own lives of what real love looks like, which isn't what the world thinks is love. They'd push back and say, whoa, that's mean. You're not going to be loved. Your children are going to kick you out of their lives. So when people say, well, if you do that, then your child's not going to trust you. If you do that, then your child's not going to love you. Well, exactly. I'm just revealing that my child is refusing to love unconditionally. I don't want anyone in my life who's not going to be loving. So if my child will only love me if I give them what they want, then that's not really love.
So this takes a very strong soul, because most of us are not even willing to consider not having our children in our lives. And I hope that you'll reconsider.
So basically, I own you or I don't want you. And while the beliefs of ConneXions might appear to be harmless, extreme and unhinged, yes, but not really criminal-worthy, Sherry Franke, who is the oldest daughter, exposed how drastically things changed when her already unbalanced mother started to associate the views and practices of the ConneXions Classroom with the gospel that she grew up with.
Some things within my family were happening that I started to question, like, I don't know if this is okay. Like, I don't know if God would actually support this. Like, is this really the gospel? And so for a long time, for like 7 months of my freshman year in college, I was just debating. I was like, I don't know what to believe. Like, I believe the gospel is true, but I don't know exactly what that gospel is.
Life coach in the
gospel.
gospel.
Like life coaching in the gospel. This is too extreme. I need to do something, change something, but I wasn't sure how. Because, you know, I want to honor my family. We're supposed to honor our parents. And I felt that to disagree with them was sinful, and that God would be mad at me too. Whenever I'd go home, you know, it was like, oh, we use this language, we talk about things like this. And then I noticed, like, when I would leave my family, like, I would just feel like spiritually drained. Like, I just wouldn't feel great.
Yeah.
I would like overhear conversations and just like find myself internally like, this isn't right, like this isn't okay. And so it got to the point where I was like, I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. Looking back, like, God placed some people in my life, like really good mentors, that were able to help me through it. Really good bishops have been amazing. I've been able to reconnect with like a family that I was friends with in high school, and they've kind of taken me in as their own daughter. And so like I had like, I felt like I had them to go to. It was hard to like not have my own family.
Yeah.
And then to hear other people talking about their trials and say, well, my parents were my rock, like they were there for me. And I was like, man.
And though Sherry expressed how extreme things had gotten as her mother did get more deeply involved in this ConneXions classroom, I don't think anybody truly knew how bad things were until that little boy escaped from Jodi Hildebrandt's home and ran to the neighbor's house for help.
Good evening. Our top story tonight, team coverage with new information about what authorities knew about a former YouTuber accused of abusing her children and when.
Police records first obtained by the KSL investigators today reveal several visits to Ruby Franke's Springville home last year.
We'll begin with KSL investigator Daniela Rivera, who just this evening obtained a recording of 911 calls that started this criminal case. Daniela?
Well, Mike and Deanie, we want folks to know this call is difficult to listen to. We are now hearing what police dispatchers heard as they were asked to respond to Jodi Hildebrandt's home a week ago after Ruby Franke's child escaped and went to a neighbor's home for help.
His ankles are taped up and he won't tell us why. This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Ruby Franke, known for her YouTube channel 8 Passengers, which garnered the attention of millions of people around the world, was arrested Wednesday on 2 counts of second-degree felony aggravated child abuse. Arresting documents detail that the arrest was made after a child climbed out of the window of an Ivins residence at around 10:50 a.m. Wednesday and ran to a neighbor's home for help. The home belonged to Jodi Hildebrandt, who was involved with a parent counseling service called ConneXions, and was also arrested in relation to the case. The child knocked on the door and asked for food and water, but the neighbor noticed duct tape on the child's ankles and wrists and called police, documents state. The calling party stated the juvenile appeared to be emaciated and malnourished with open wounds and duct tape around the extremities. A statement from local authorities reads. Police described the wounds, neglect, and malnourishment of the child to be severe, arresting documents state, and the child was taken to the hospital for treatment. After the first child was taken to the hospital, another child was discovered in the home and was found to be malnourished as well, officers reported. A search warrant was obtained by police, and during the search of the home, evidence was located consistent with the markings found on the juvenile, authorities said in a statement. Arresting documents state Franke was seen on a YouTube video filmed in the residence just days before the incident, which adds to Miss Franke being present in the home and having knowledge of the abuse, malnourishment, and neglect, documents state. Franke's oldest daughter, Sherry Franke, had made a post on her Instagram account with a photo of police captioned, "Finally." She would later add another story with the following statement. "Hi all, today has been a big day. Me and my family are so glad justice is being served. We've been trying to tell the police and CPS for years about this, and so glad they finally decided to step in. Kids are safe, but there's a long road ahead. Please keep them in your prayers and also respect their privacy." Katie Paulson, another YouTuber, spoke with Fox 13 News about the case. "This is to a level that I don't think anyone understood," Paulson said. "She was saying how she would send her daughter to school without food. She was almost like she was bragging about it." She recalled another time when Franke's son openly talked about his punishment on the channel. He was talking about how he had been sleeping on the floor on a beanbag chair and how his mom had taken away his bed and taken away his door, and how he had been sent away to like this wilderness camp. She wasn't the only one who noticed concerning interactions in the videos. Diane Nevins remembers being horrified at what she was watching on YouTube. "It was kind of like every video. There was something to be shocked about," Nevins said. Her son couldn't walk until he was like 2.5 years old, and she never got him any help, and she admitted that at one point he had fallen off the couch or she dropped him, but he had gotten no physical therapy. Anything. Nevins said when she commented her concerns, she was blocked by Franke. Paulson also said when she did a report on what Franke and her kids were saying in the video, Franke's lawyer threatened to sue her. At the time of the arrest, from what I understand, Jodi was arrested first in Ivins, Utah, and Ruby was arrested shortly after in Springville. The strange thing is, Ivins and Springville are almost 4 hours apart, so why were the two children with Jodi and Ruby was almost 300 miles away? It has been reported by neighbors and other people that were more familiar with the situation that Ruby made a habit of leaving the kids at home, either with Jodi Hildebrandt or alone entirely, and going to either visit family or to participate in more trainings with this ConneXions Classoom. So this may have been one of those situations where she was traveling and leaving the kids with Jodi. So a question you might be asking at this point is, where was Kevin in all of this? It has been said that Kevin and Ruby had been separated for about a year at the time that these more extreme situations were going on. However, during an interview between Chris Cuomo and Kevin's attorney, his attorney stated that Ruby had taken the kids out of the county for the summer, and it seems as though that was so they could stay with Jodi in her home. This may have been so Ruby could maximize the content that she and Jodi were creating for their classroom and their supporters. And I think it would also be fair to wonder if this may have been because Ruby and Jodi were becoming more extreme in their ideas and they wanted to isolate the children further from outside influences. Either way, Kevin was not living with the family when everything imploded, though I'm not sure he would have stepped in to help in the way that he wants us to believe that he would have. Based on things that Kevin has said in interviews over the years as he responded with Ruby to the public concern over the extreme parenting that they seem to agree on as a couple, it seems as though it's not that Kevin was not involved in or did not support these extreme parenting tactics, but rather that he is just as narcissistic and delusional as his wife is, and therefore does not believe that what they were doing was actually wrong or questionable. In a Business Insider article from 2020, the couple attempted to clear up the controversy over forcing their teenage son to sleep on a beanbag for months on end, and this was Kevin's response. Kevin told Insider it was a moment of vulnerability and part of Chad's story of redemption that showed his victory over the challenges that he's faced over the last several years. The people who've been following us this whole time, they would have perceived it as such, he said. The problem is when individuals who aren't familiar with the narrative don't get the entire story and they fill the unknown with their own narrative. And this is where it really blew up. Another way we're able to gauge just how horrendous of a person that Kevin is, which is probably why he and Ruby were perfect for each other, were the comments made by former students of his during the time he spent as a college professor at BYU, teaching Introduction to Civil and Environmental Engineering and another class called Computational Methods course, which covers techniques for solving civil engineering problems. Some of these ratings read, unable to get in contact outside of class, he is very controlling, and you can only have the same views that he has or you will be looked down on. Caused me so much stress that I dropped out. Another one reads, this professor is so full of himself. He always makes sure to remind the class that he is the leader and he will guide us into a healthier style of life. So hard to get in touch with him outside of the lecture, very unprofessional. Very strange man. If you don't agree with Professor Franke once, you are looked past for the remainder of the course. Now, if you've taken a few of his summer courses, he's trying to get you to get involved with Jodi Hildebrandt, who is renounced as a terrible person at BYU and LDS, and who has severe untreated mental illness. Terrible, terrible people. He once pulled me by the arm into his office to yell at me for doing a TikTok dance outside the building. Kevin is horrible. I cried every day. He's very abusive to his students, and we were left traumatized. He had a meltdown last month in front of the class and scolded everyone. I tried to contact the dean, but nothing happened. He screamed and yelled at us for using TikTok and went on a rant. He threw a textbook at me, and I'm filing for battery charge. Kevin believes that mental health is a personal choice, which is a very dangerous belief. He is a horrible and uncaring man who shouldn't be teaching. There were a few nice ones too, but I don't feel like he deserves any grace. There were a lot of students that complained about him, including his personal and political beliefs in their classroom, especially when it was completely irrelevant, and it seemed as though he and his wife were particularly triggered by TikTok. What we can see, at least in my opinion, this man has no awareness about the harm he inflicted on his children, and both he and Ruby will never see their manipulation of these kids as anything worth questioning at all. Now, after all is said and done, Kevin said that he does want to keep his children together and to have them in his fatherly care, but seeing as he does not seem to view his behavior as problematic at all, it's probably best that that doesn't happen. Another significant aspect to consider is the fact that Ruby's siblings, who had large vlogging platforms of their own, had expressed concern for years about what was happening to their young nieces and nephews, but one, they only intervened as far as they claim the law would allow them to, and two, they said that they clung to each other for support as the egregious treatment of these kids happened, and they just watched from the sidelines and chose not to make a bigger deal about it out of respect for the kids. After the story of her sister's arrest broke, Ruby's sister Bonnie posted a video on her Instagram stories addressing this situation. However, she did receive so much backlash for this video that it wasn't long before she deleted it. But the funny thing about the internet, Bonnie, is there is no way to permanently delete your content, which is something that neither you or any of your siblings seem to care about when it comes to your own kids. Ruby deleted her entire channel quite a while ago, yet as we can see, there are hundreds of hours of content still available, and it will be until the end of time. So, though you believe you should be granted the opportunity to have your video forgotten just because you chose to remove it and you were embarrassed by it, I don't believe that you deserve that same level of grace. So here it is.
Regular scheduled content that was supposed to go out tomorrow, Friday, and it is Thursday evening, and nothing that I could have anticipated. I don't think any of us could have really anticipated. If you have the internet, you have seen news articles on my sister, Ruby, from the 8 passengers, and my sisters and I, we are on the very same page. We put out a message. You can read that on Instagram. For the last 3 years, we have truly clung on to each other and offering support to one another. I don't think any of us could have ever seen this coming. All did as much as we could legally, and you don't know what you don't know. I do feel a little bit numb at this point. The only thing that we ultimately care about is that our nieces and nephews are safe, and they are. And that is the only thing that matters to any of us. It is going to feel weird for me to move forward. And I think, do I just move forward?
Just take it a day at a time. Who knows what anything has in store, but we just know right now that
thoughts even for myself. I don't know what I would even tell myself, let alone tell all of you. I think times like these is where it really tests your belief in God. And I know that timing is everything. And I know our family will be okay. And things like this happen, and somehow we each find a way to move forward. No matter what situation you're finding yourself in. The sun rises every day. The sun sets every day, and each day you move forward. That's all you can do.
First of all, she seemed very concerned about the content that she had scheduled to put up already, but she knew it would be weird if she didn't at least address the situation before proceeding as usual. Second of all, it is apparent that she is very, very worried about what it might look like if she doesn't talk about this issue, because she wants to move forward as quickly as possible, but doesn't want to seem like she doesn't care. And I'm not saying that she doesn't care about this situation, but she is concerned about what impact this is going to have on her own channel and her own income and her own revenue and her own reputation. And I also find it interesting that she's saying that they were concerned about this for years, but it was also not something they could have seen coming.
You know what would have been an appropriate response, Bonnie, is if you had told your audience that you'll be pausing your content for a while so you can focus your time and energy on making sure that your nieces and nephews are being taken care of, that they're recovering, and that they know for the first time in their lives that someone in their life has unconditional love for them and will give them the attention they need without strings or monetization attached. Your audience would have 100% understood if you had just ducked out for a while. However, your unwillingness to prioritize their well-being now adds to the understanding as to why it took a child climbing out of a window for them to finally get help. But I'm glad you had your sisters to cling to while they were being tied up in the basement. And to Bonnie's subscribers, please stop supporting her channel.
There are just so many narcissistic things about this video that I can see that this is potentially a trait that just runs in the family. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there is no sense in the statement where you believe that not getting involved in making sure that your nieces and nephews were safe years ago was out of respect for their privacy. These kids haven't had an ounce of privacy in their entire lives. The least you could do was grant them safety. So what happens now? It took a long time to get here. If it's not abundantly clear by now, the Franke children spent years in a hostile home environment with parents who were narcissistic, manipulative, controlling, and extreme for their entire childhoods. Kevin and Ruby Franke's tough approach to raising kids, which she ironically seemed to believe would help them grow up to understand compassion, empathy, respect, and consequences, was selfish and harsh from the birth of their first child until the day that these sweet babies were removed from their care. We saw a mother who dealt in the extreme at all times without letting up. While she tried to teach them about forgiveness, she never let them forget a single mistake that they made. While she tried to teach them about empathy, she had no understanding for the fact that not only are these kids imperfect as children, but flaws come with the territory of just being a human. Yet there was no grace for their mistakes or any of the bumps and potholes that come from just growing and learning. While she tried to teach them about respect, she ignored their pleas for privacy, let them know their voices and opinions were inferior and invalid while they were living in her home, and that what she wanted and felt was the top priority at all times. Ruby never seemed to consider for a minute that the most effective way to teach children to be good and kind is to be good and kind to them. That if you want them to demonstrate compassionate and understanding behavior to others, that you demonstrate compassion and understanding behavior to them. Children are great at copying what we do, and that's why so many of us understand it when people look at a child with abnormal or extreme reactions or aggressive or selfish actions, and we say they had to learn it from somewhere. Ruby repeatedly punished her kids for reacting to the environment that she and her husband created and took everything that they earned for her as her own. And yes, there were years of reports from neighbors about concern for the kids' well-being, but unfortunately, manipulating your kids, telling them that they do not have the right to anything in their home, being a mom who refuses to bring lunch to your child at school, making them miss Christmas, or telling them that they couldn't have breakfast if they didn't do their chores, none of these things qualify as criminal behavior. Unfortunately, it's not until the physical abuse and extreme neglect becomes public, like your child running from the house to beg for help from the neighbors, that the police finally have a case to make an arrest. Which unfortunately does mean that there are kids who will be raised with the damaging effects of parents who withhold their love or place conditions on it, and any other kind of treatment that doesn't actually leave a mark. And of course, the common question that everybody asks in these cases is, why did CPS not do anything or remove these kids from the home earlier? Aside from the reasons that I just mentioned, we also need to become painfully aware that CPS is one of the most broken, underfunded, understaffed, and unsupported agencies in the entire country. There are not enough foster parents to remove every kid from their home and place them in a better environment. So that means that it's not until there's an extreme situation where their child's life is in undeniable danger that CPS might even be able to step in and take care of it. They don't have the best training or the best resources, and this agency that's meant to protect children is usually at the mercy of whoever is willing to take the case and actually pursue justice, which can vary from caseworker to caseworker. And I'm not trying to make the whole agency out to be a bad thing. Obviously, we need these things to do our best to get kids out of these circumstances when they do need us to. But what happens with these kids after CPS gets involved doesn't always equal a better outcome for them. I know that there are many similarities in this case when compared to what happened with the Turpin children just a few years ago. A child escaping and police being alerted to other abused children in the home and the parents ending up in prison. And we all believed that once those kids were removed from their parents' care, that things would undoubtedly get better for them. However, years later, when the brave teenage daughter that escaped from the home, Jordan, sat down for an interview to discuss what happened, what life was like for her and her siblings as they were growing up, and what happened since then, while we were hoping that they had found homes that could show them what it was like to live in a loving home with good parents, it was discovered that the children had been split up, and most of them continued to experience similar abuse and neglect in the foster homes that they had been placed in. So while the automatic instinct is to ask, why doesn't CPS do more? I honestly think we need to do more ourselves to make sure more homes are available for these kids to go into. And then we might see some of these situations addressed in the way that we think that they should be. And there have been some new developments in the story that are really important to add in here. So according to a September 6th article from the New York Post, it says Ruby Franke and her business partner Jodi Hildebrandt have been charged with 4 additional counts of aggravated child abuse. Court documents obtained by Page 6 Wednesday show the state of Utah formally filed the additional charges following the 8 passengers host's arrest on August 30th. Franke, who was initially charged with 2 counts of child abuse, is scheduled to make an initial court appearance on Friday, September 8th. The momfluencer's lawyer declined to comment. A press release from the Washington County Attorney's Office claimed that each defendant is accused of causing or permitting serious physical injury to the victims in 3 different ways. 1, a combination of multiple physical injuries or torture. 2, starvation or malnutrition that jeopardizes life. And 3, causing severe emotional harm. So basically, the more information that comes out, the more vile and depraved these women are showing themselves to be. And then Thursday, September 8th was the initial hearing for both Ruby and Jodi. And instead of focusing on her own behavior and her own conduct and her own reasons for being in the situation that she is now and trying to address those, Ruby's first instinct was to try to drag one of her kids down with her. Ruby Franke reportedly made shocking sexual abuse allegations about one of her 6 children during a hearing for charges she faces for aggravated child abuse in Provo, Utah, Thursday. The disgraced YouTuber 41 claimed during a court appearance that one of her minor kids abused a sibling and molested several other family members and neighbors for years, according to the Daily Mail. Franke, who appeared via video from a Utah jail, reportedly also claimed that the troubled child began looking at pornography at 3 years old. After the unnamed kid allegedly began abusing a younger sibling, the alleged victim also began participating in sexual abuse, the outlet claims the former family vlogger also said. The molestation was reportedly disguised by a patting game, but no further details were provided. Franke alleged that the child who began the sexual abuse confessed their crimes to her in May. The social media star did not provide any evidence of her disturbing claims per the Daily Mail. I have a hard time believing that Ruby Franke would allow her child to have unchecked access to pornography for years and not nip it in the bud immediately. This was a viral video of when her daughter, Julie, was supposed to be part of a TikTok dance that her whole class was participating in as a way to kind of shake up the day at school. And this was the reaction that Ruby had when she found out what the song that they would be dancing to was.
Julie is in a PE class over at the middle school. The teacher is going to have all of the students in her class, which includes Julie, do a TikTok dance for the school to interrupt their lunch, like a surprise dance to everybody. TikTok dance. What are the dance moves? And she's like, well, in the real dance, they're kind of naughty. And she said just to do something different there. And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, some of the girls still twerk. I said, what songs are in this? She told me one of the songs. And I looked it up to look up the lyrics. It is straight up hardcore.
And this was after a follow-up meeting that Ruby decided she needed to have with some of the teachers that approved this song.
I said, my problem is the choice of songs. And she says, well, all the songs were approved by me. The teacher put together a list of songs and she gave them to me and I approved them. And I said, okay, so you approved this song that has all of these lyrics in it. And she says, well, we're not dancing to those lyrics. It's just a portion. And she says, I think it's really great because I actually really like it because Smiths used it in their commercial. It's part of pop culture.
And then she really loses it.
Introducing them to the world. And you're saying it's okay.
So you expect us to believe that this mom would allow her child to access porn and to start having inappropriate interactions with multiple people over the years, and nobody knew about it until now. Second of all, there is a long history of neighbors reporting concerns about the behavior going on in this family, and particularly about Kevin and Ruby towards their kids. They weren't shy about desperately trying to get CPS involved to check on the well-being of these kids. Yet in the numerous articles and threads that I've read where people that lived next to this family were trying to make sure that these kids were okay, and they actually knew what was going on around the home, not one of them said anything about one of the Franke kids being any kind of predator. Not one They were all complaining about Ruby and Kevin. So if there was this child predator running around the neighborhood, you would have thought that would have been at least part of one of the CPS reports or one of the comments from the neighbors, or somebody would have brought attention to it far sooner. And lastly, of all the things that Ruby could bring up in a trial that is about her own actions and her own behavior, why would the first thing that she would think of was to make her own child try to look like as much of, or even worse of a criminal than she is? Yes, if there is problematic behavior by this child that does need to be addressed, that can be taken care of separately. That is for a separate court, and that is for a separate case. And if you as a parent knew that it was going on and didn't report it, or didn't draw attention to it, or didn't stop it, unfortunately, that's going to be something else that can be added on to your case. As I said, this accusation makes no sense whatsoever, and what it looks like to me is that she's determined to not be the only one in this home labeled as an abuser, which is going to have the opposite effect. This woman is sick. Anyway, this story has truly been exhausting to put together. I have spent days combing through clips and articles, and it is something where there is more and more information coming out every single day. And I would love to know your thoughts on all of it in the comments below. Do you think that Ruby Franke deserves to be charged to the fullest extent of the law and never see the light of day again? Or do you think that people have made too big of a deal about her parenting style? And how can we teach Ruby a little bit of compassion, understanding, and repentance?
And of course, the biggest question of the day is, are family vlogging channels harmful, and should they be allowed to continue at all? My view is, whether or not this type of content is ever made illegal, it is our responsibility to protect children from being the targets of abuse whenever they can. In this case, it's definitely an abuse of power, which is when a parent is able to use a child's lack of maturity, experience, and development to their advantage and exploit them for attention or money because that child is literally incapable of saying no and incapable of understanding the long-term consequences of the thing that they're participating in. The parents have control of the image they're putting out there, and the parents are able to make themselves look however they want, and the parents are able to understand what it means to have their identity and their lives all over the internet forever. But the child cannot make that choice, and by the time they are old enough to understand what that means, it's too late for them to change it. But that also begs the question, if family vlogging channels are a problem, where do we draw the line about what content with children in it should be allowed online? Should there be laws that say if there is an image with a child in it, should it automatically be marked as private? Should a certain length of content be limited? Because I do see a lot of people put their kids in YouTube shorts. And while I think they are so stinking adorable, and I'm not accusing these parents of abuse, should that content be treated the same way as family vlogging? What are the answers, guys? What protections need to be in place?
Also, let me know if you would like to see more of this content sprinkled in with everything else that I cover, or if I should just leave it to true crime creators and stick to culture, politics, and current events. I just want to end this by saying at least we can take comfort for now that one of little Eve's prayers is being answered.
Eve, she was 6 years old at the time, and she was saying her prayers, and she said the cutest thing. I thought it was so cute, and I started laughing. She said, "Dear Heavenly Father, please help me to survive."
Thank you for watching. Please like this video, leave a comment below, and please be sure you are subscribed to my channel, and I will see you in my next much shorter video.